The male protagonist of this anime seems to be the worst student in the school, like an unnoticed shadow, but is actually a super warrior. He enjoys being unnoticed and always hides in the dark to explore the limits of human power. Later, an accident causes him to travel to another world and form a shadow garden full of strong and high-status beauties, such as a human princess, an elven magician, and a beast-kim warrior. Now, let's reveal the story of how the male protagonist becomes invincible in another world and conquers these beautiful women. The male protagonist of this anime, Shadow, has a very popular deskmate, Akane, who is known as the campus belle. She has been Shadow's deskmate for 3 months, but Shadow has never called her by the right name, which makes her very irritated. However, she never reveals her true emotions in public because of her prominent family lineage, coupled with the fact that she is a star who appeared in TV series. She needs to pay more attention to her image. One day after school, Akane finds her driver is absent and never responds to her calls, so she decides to return home on foot alone. While making her way down a desolate street, she meets a muscular man who gives off an uneasy vibe. She instantly tries to run away but is blocked by the man's partner. As she struggles against their grip, she seems to see her deskmate, Shadow, before she loses consciousness. By the time Akane wakes up, she has been locked up. The strong man and his accomplice killed her driver and kidnapped her. The thugs seem to do it for money, but actually, they are hired to take revenge on Akane's father. At this moment, Shadow is outside the door. This ordinary student takes out his backpack, which contains his disguises to hide his identity. The strong man's accomplice casts greedy eyes on the pretty girl Akane as he is about to do something. Shadow shows up with a headgear to cover his face. The air around him becomes terrifying. Shadow knocks off the opponent's pistol, and after a set of consecutive attacks, he wins easily. Next, it is the turn of the strong man. The thug throws away his pistol even though he has seen Shadow's strength, which means he is very confident in his own. As a veteran, the strong man is much more difficult to deal with, hurting Shadow in its first move. However, the injury doesn't scare Shadow at all. On the contrary, it ignites his enthusiasm since he hasn't encountered a formidable adversary for a long time. As Shadow becomes serious about the battle, the situation is instantly reversed. The muscular man's arm sustains significant damage, rendering him unable to launch any counterattacks and can only focus on defense. His once arrogant demeanor also vanishes, replaced by a desperate attempt to reach for the pistol, seeing it as his last chance. Yet, Shadow's movements are astonishingly fast, with a set of which he defeats the muscular man completely. Seeing Shadow approaching, Akane is very scared that the man may kill her as well. Luckily, he just cuts the rope for her to not reveal his identity. Shadow then hides, wondering if he can find stronger opponents somewhere else. After that, Akane's father pulls strings to suppress the kidnapping because he doesn't want her daughter to be exposed to the public because of such an event, and the police never figure out who saved Akane. When Akane returns to school, Shadow calls her name correctly, which surprises Akane, but what she doesn't expect is that this is the last time they see each other. Shortly after, a traffic accident is reported on TV, and the victim turns out to be Shadow. Subsequently, a memory of Shadow's previous life emerges. He stood out from his peers since childhood, when everyone aspired to be superheroes or perhaps even infamous villains. Shadow's aspiration was to become an unnoticed but formidable man. But when he grew up, Shadow was disappointed to find that no matter how strong he was, he couldn't have supernatural powers like the heroes in novels. Even if he defeated a heavily armed army, he couldn't defend against a nuclear bomb. At the last moment when Shadow's consciousness dissipated, he erupted with a cry of reluctance in his heart. He wanted to surpass the limits of human power to become the strongest. Back to the present time, after Shadow dies in a car accident, he gets reincarnated as a newborn baby. His mother is very gentle while his father is a bald baron. It seems Shadow gets a good script in this world. In a noble family, he doesn't have to worry about starving or being attacked, which allows him to discover the world and find the most suitable way to become stronger. Shadow's family has a lineage of spellswords, and there is always a powerful spellsword in every generation. For example, Shadow's sister, Clare, shows amazing talents. In fact, Shadow is even more talented than his sister, but he likes to do great things in secret, so when Clare attracts everyone's attention, Shadow disguises himself as the ordinary. At the age of 10, Shadow has already possessed remarkable strength. He frequently ventures out at night and takes down ruthless bandits effortlessly even if enemies are armed with guns and holding numerical advantage. Shadow's weapons and defensive equipment bear the traits of the slime, which can not only attack enemies from a distance with various forms, but also shift into defensive formations. General bandits can only bully ordinary people, and are no match for genius Shadow, who can eliminate a whole bandit team in 10 minutes or so. Since the victims have been killed by the bandits, the properties then belong to Shadow. When Shadow is counting his harvest tonight, he accidentally finds a pile of rotting flesh. Shadow feels the strange magic fluctuations on the flesh and realizes this is probably a demon-possessed body. It's said the one who gets possessed by the demon will gradually become rotting flesh. Shadow starts secret research on it for a month and finally lifts the curse, turning the rotting flesh into its true form, a blonde-haired elven girl. At this point, Shadow comes up with an idea. He has been wanting to form his secret power, and the elven girl is his initial candidate for recruitment. He lies that the demon-possessed body is in fact a hoax. The truth hides behind the legend where 3 heroes conquered the demon Diabolos and saved the world. However, before he died, Diabolos cast a curse upon the 3 heroes, claiming that their descendants would all become rotting flesh. Later, Diabolos' followers deliberately spread rumors that those who turned into rotting flesh were demon-possessed, so that the world would expel and imprison these heroes' descendants. Therefore, when the followers try to resurrect Diabolos, no hero's descendants will come to ruin it. Shadow can tell the elven girl is burning with the longing for revenge. He seizes the opportunity to name her Alpha, promising to form an army to fight against the cult of Diabolos. Alpha has been brainwashed by Shadow, swearing that she will devote all her life to Shadow. In fact, what Shadow said was all made up. He just wants to form his forces to fight against those powerful but evil organizations. To his surprise, Alpha attaches much attention to the revenge and starts to think about where to make money and recruit. 3 years later, Shadow continues pretending to be an ordinary before his family, but every time he competes with Clare, he will teach her some skills without being noticed by anyone because he thinks her movements are too slow. As a result, Clare always feels strange that whenever she engages in a contest with her weaker brother, her combat abilities seem to be improved. Clare is 15 years old this year, and it's time for her to go study at the Spellsword School in the capital. But before setting out, Clare is missing. Her room is in chaos, which proves there was once a fierce fight happening. Shadow soon starts his rescue, and the maid beside him reveals her real form. She is named Beta, Shadow's subordinate recruited by Alpha. In the past 3 years, Alpha helped Shadow recruit 6 powerful subordinates, plus Alpha herself known as the Shadow 7. They suspect it was the cult of Diabolos that kidnapped Clare because the cult thinks Clare is one of the descendants of the heroes, which bothers Shadow. It seems Shadow 7 really takes his lies seriously, and they consider every evil person a member of the cult of Diabolos. Shadow quickly switches the topic and orders Beta to get others gathered to look for Clare. He casually throws a dart into the map, which misleads Beta to think Shadow throws the dart to instruct them to where Clare is locked. Beta admires Shadow's scouting ability. At night, the kidnapper is interrogating Clare, believing that she is also a demon-possessed person. He wants to unravel the mystery of why Clare hasn't changed into a rotting flesh. Later, he stumbles upon the revelation that her prowess steadily advances each time she engages in a contest with her brother. Therefore, he speculates that it might be Shadow who prevents Clare from rotting. Clare is worried that the kidnappers will strike at her brother, and tries to stop them though she is injured, but she is no match for the kidnapper and gets punched to the ground. Just then, the kidnapper's companion brings bad news that 7 powerful girls broke in, whose strength is comparable to the elite soldiers, and the guards are no match. When the kidnapper rushes out to check, his companions have all been slain. Shadow 7 tells the kidnapper that they are here to defeat the plot of the cult of Diabolos. Shadow's made-up story is unexpectedly of great concern to the kidnapper, who fights with Shadow 7 while asking them where they knew it from. After a few rounds, the kidnapper finds that he is no match for Shadow 7, so he takes a pill that makes him stronger. He pretends to launch a strong attack to distract Shadow 7's attention. Seizing the opportunity to flee, the kidnapper, convinced of his escape to safety, accidentally encounters Shadow, who is lost. Actually, the kidnapper is already very strong and possesses greater magical power than Alpha. Unfortunately, he meets immense talents, Shadow, and is defeated. Eventually, the kidnapper gets killed and his pocket watch with a photo of his daughter is also taken by Shadow. After that, Clare returns home. As she recovered, she sets out to the capital for her studies. To Shadow's surprise, Shadow 7 claims to leave as well to expand their organization to fight against Diabolos. But Shadow thinks it may be their excuse to leave, since they've grown up to figure out the cult of Diabolos is made up and it's time to stop the childish game. But it doesn't affect Shadow that much. He comes to the capital of the kingdom alone and continues pretending to be ordinary. In his past life as an earthling, he didn't have superpowers. Now he gets to be reborn in this world with sword skills and magic. He will try his best to achieve the dream hidden in his heart, even just by himself. He wants to be the Eminence in Shadow, who can be low profile but has the power to control the whole world. Shadow's disguise is very successful. At the age of 15, he is promoted to the same Midgar Academy as his sister. Because of his mediocre performance, he is assigned to a rundown apartment far from the city center. To not be late, he has to catch the train to school every day. 7 months have passed since Shadow got into the academy, where he met 2 new friends. They make a bet on the school exam, and Shadow, who lost the game, is punished for confessing his love to Princess Alexia. Alexia is so popular at school that there are a lot of excellent boys confessing love to her, but getting rejected every day. Shadow isn't worried about getting rejected at all. He will go confessing nervously with his body shivering and cry loud after being rejected. That's how a typical background student will act. To his astonishment, Alexia accepts his love confession, which also surprises his 2 concealed friends nearby. Consequently, Shadow, who originally wanted to be ordinary, unexpectedly becomes the focus of students in school. Wherever he does, he will attract everyone's attention and raise a discussion. The 2 students who initially encouraged Shadow to confess are now riddled with regret, believing they are more excellent than Shadow and would have succeeded if they had approached Alexia instead. At this time, Alexia sits next to Shadow, bringing a lot of delicious food. Shadow wants Alexia to hate and break up with him, so he deliberately acts like a yokel, greedily grabbing the food. However, it doesn't alienate Alexia from Shadow. Instead, she proposes to have classes with him this afternoon. Because of Alexia's recommendation, Shadow is transferred from the low-level fencing class to the elite class, where the teacher, Zenon, is a royal fencing master, and every student works harder than those in the low-level classes. During the class, instead of chit-chat noise, there is only the sound of swords clashing with swords. Shadow is surprised to find when he practices with Alexia that they have similar fencing skills. They both focus on the base of the sword instead of fancy moves. Alexia has a genius sister Iris who masters fancy fencing skills, which leads to Alexia's rating being consistently inferior to Iris's. After class, Zenon approaches Alexia. He is one of her suitors and wants to be her fiancé. Later, Alexia tells Shadow about her plan. The reason why she accepted Shadow and agreed to be his girlfriend is that she wanted to stop these suitors from harassing her. Moreover, considering Shadow's seemingly unremarkable qualifications and ordinary background, she believes she can easily boss him. Later, she mentions 2 points that make Shadow unable to reject her. Firstly, she knows from the 2 students that Shadow's confession to her was his punishment after losing the bet. If she exposes it, Shadow will be in trouble. Besides, Alexia is willing to hire Shadow with decent payment, while Shadow also wants to make money to start his organization. Therefore, he takes the job. The next few days, Alexia always holds Shadow wherever they go. But Zenon isn't jealous at all. Alexia acts more like a lady in public while showing her childish personality when she is with Shadow, complaining that Zenon hasn't given up on her. Therefore, Alexia starts hanging out around the city with Shadow, intending to be seen by more people to cause a greater impact on Zenon. Shadow can't figure out why Alexia doesn't accept Zenon, who is obviously excellent in every way. At this point, Alexia says the reason why she hates Zenon is that he is pretending to be perfect while everyone should have some flaws. 2 weeks later, Alexia and Shadow have a bitter quarrel after school. Alexia mentions the ordinary sword style that she and Shadow use, which she is actually disgusted about. If it weren't for her talent limitation, she also wants to perform the magnificent genius sword art like her sister Iris. Shadow tries to enlighten Alexia that she should just be herself instead of caring too much about others' opinions, which provokes her. When she lost to her sister Iris, that's how Iris comforted her, but it hurt Alexia's self-esteem. Shadow tells Alexia that he cares about neither the genius swordplaying nor the disaster causing heavy casualties that attract public attention. He only cares about mastering the basics of the sword skills, while his subtext is that he pursues a low-profile but powerful life, which is just like basic swordsmanship. Alexia obviously doesn't get it, and she is enraged by the argument, deciding to end the relationship with Shadow. Shadow is fine with it, but the 2 students are annoying. They keep throwing questions like if Shadow is sad or not, and when is he done with Alexia as her boyfriend. Just when they are walking to the gate, they are blocked by Zenon, whose words shock and frighten him. It turns out that Alexia hasn't been back to her dorm since yesterday, and Shadow has become a suspect in kidnapping her because they had been together yesterday. Shadow meekly kneels, noticing that he and his 2 classmates have been surrounded by heavily armed soldiers. At the same time, Princess Alexia awakens from her coma, only to find herself controlled by magical shackles. Later, she notices a monster imprisoned in her neighboring cell. Strangely, the monster turns its head away to evade her gaze, seemingly unwilling to be seen by her. Just then, a researcher arrives, who is a crazy man tasked with watching over Alexia. His erotic words reveal a piece of crucial information. That is, Alexia's royal blood can be used in the research of resurrecting the demon Diabolos. The researcher draws several tubes of Alexia's blood, and he keeps talking to himself in a frenzy, complaining about his master for sabotaging his research, which makes him even more furious. So he begins to vent on the monster in the cell. Alexia can't bear to see the monster suffering, calling the researcher back to draw her blood. The researcher then forces Alexia to eat because the longer she lives, the more blood she can provide. The monster silently watches it, with tears in his eyes. Meanwhile, poor Shadow is mistaken as the kidnapper, being brutally interrogated by the knights. But Shadow is neither afraid nor angry. Instead, he enjoys playing the coward. Shadow cries and begs for mercy, completely disguising himself as an ordinary person. Several days pass by. Xenon reports the results of the interrogation to Alexia's sister Iris. Shadow knows nothing, and the strength he shows is too weak to beat Alexia, so they both agree that Shadow is most likely not the kidnapper. But Iris is so vigilant that she sends the knights to follow Shadow after releasing him. Just then, a quarrel in the school draws her attention. Through the window, she sees Shadow's sister, Clare, valiantly come into her brother's defense. Clare believes that her brother would never engage in the kidnapping of the princess. She boldly announces her intent to duel with the interrogating knights, and other students are trying hard to stop her. Witnessing the scene, Iris can't help but reflect on the close relationship she once shared with her sister Alexia, who has gradually distanced from her over time. Meanwhile, Alexia is very weak, because the researcher has been drawing blood from her but only giving her some non-nutritious rice. Shadow is no better than her. He is thrown out by the knights and covered in scars. On the way back to his dormitory, Shadow senses someone spying on him. Just then, a mysterious girl shows up to help him solve the stalker. Soon the mysterious girl appears in Shadow's dormitory. She turns out to be the leader of Shadow 7, Alpha. Seeing Shadow is hungry, she brings him a burger and watches him eating with strong affection. Alpha tells Shadow that their organization has expanded a lot and is trying to catch up with the cult of Diabolos. Shadow believes Alpha is just kindly accompanying him to play the game of kindness fighting with evilness. He never thinks that the cult of Diabolos, an organization he fabricated, actually exists. However, he takes pleasure in portraying the role of the dark hero, casually asking about the recent achievement of this organization. Alpha then reveals to Shadow that some members of the cult of Diabolos may have been undercover in the Knights. They may be the real kidnappers and are extracting Alexia's blood as part of a larger conspiracy. Before leaving, Alpha asks Shadow if he wants to kill the two Knights who interrogated him. Shadow decides to let them go for the time being because others can easily suspect that he is the criminal who takes revenge on the interrogators. A few more days with hidden turbulence pass by. Shadow quietly gets rid of the new stalker. With the decent money he made from Alexia, Shadow has been buying antiques to set up his secret stronghold whenever he has time. Just then, a hot girl sneaks into the stronghold, who turns out to be the elf girl Beta, ranking second in Shadow 7. She has always admired Shadow and reveals to him that they gathered hundreds of people in the royal capital, ready to attack the various strongholds of the cult of Diabolos at the same time. Shadow is shocked, thinking that these people are all actors hired by his companions. In fact, they are all elites carefully recruited by Shadow 7, and this will also be the first large-scale external battle organized by them, in which all members of Shadow 7 will join. Shadow interrupts Beta, saying that he will not miss such an exciting game and taking the initiative to attack. The undercover members of the cult of Diabolos never expect they are about to die. As Shadow reappears, they seize the opportunity to throw Alexia's shoes at him, framing him for the kidnapping incident. Just then, two lifeless bodies appear before them, which turns out to be the stalkers who had been spying on Shadow. Seizing the moment while the knights are momentarily distracted, Shadow initiates an assault. The two knights are the men who tortured Shadow during the interrogation, and their demise at Shadow's hands seems to be a fitting retribution. Meanwhile, Shadow 7 launches an attack on the cult of Diabolos, and the royal capital is completely thrown into chaos. The researcher gets furious because he realizes that he is about to be exposed, and he has no time to do more experiments. He then directly injects Alexia's blood into the monster's body, which immediately gets enlarged. The monster soon kills the researcher. After he cuts off the magical locking device on Alexia, the monster trails out to the underground. Alexia, who has regained her freedom, meets Xenon, and Xenon is exactly the real criminal who led the kidnapping. He intends to use the research result of the royal blood to exchange for benefits to become one of the 12 knights of the cult of Diabolos. Alexia is so upset that she abandons the basic sword skills she is familiar with, trying to defeat Xenon with the more lethal genius sword skill. However, there is a huge strength gap between her and Xenon, who knocks Alexia out with little effort. At this desperate moment, Shadow shows up. A fierce battle is about to begin. Meanwhile, the enlarged monster faces a relentless assault. However, the firearms wielded by the soldiers and the swords carried by the knights prove ineffective against them. To make matters worse, the monster not only becomes larger but also possesses a formidable regeneration ability. Just then, Princess Iris, whose strength ranks very high in the kingdom, also enters the battlefield. Her participation ultimately makes the monster turn to the downside. She performs a genius sword skill that combines speed and destruction, hoping to kill the monster before it can regenerate. Just then, Shadow's subordinate, Alpha, stops Iris. She shows a far more powerful attack than Iris, killing the monster with just one attack. When the monster dies, it turns back to its human maiden form. A photo of the girl and her father is dropped on the ground, and the girl's father turns out to be the man who kidnapped Clare. Before leaving, Alpha tells Iris that she belongs to the Shadow Garden. Iris never expected that such a powerful organization would be born in the kingdom without her realizing it. Now it's Shadow's turn. The master of Shadow Garden disguises himself when shows up in front of Xenon and Alexia, neither of whom recognizes the mysterious person with a strong aura as the weak Shadow in the school. Confident in his strength, Xenon takes the initiative to attack Shadow, but he doesn't win after fighting several rounds. Taking immense pride in his abilities, Xenon has never expected he will be defeated. He doesn't even notice Shadow has been effortlessly defending all the time. Before Xenon can unleash his full potential, Shadow loses his patience and provokes Xenon with words. Feeling irritated, Xenon performs his strongest move. The two then back into a heated battle. Just then, Alexia notices that the mysterious man has repelled Xenon's attack using only basic swordsmanship. Alexia was once frustrated because her basic swordplay was not comparable to Iris's innate talent, but now she seems to regain her confidence. The battle between Shadow and Xenon also reaches a result. Shadow defeats Xenon's gorgeous swordsmanship with his ordinary swordplay. Xenon asks who Shadow is, and Shadow tells Xenon that he is from the Shadow Garden and specializes in hunting members of the Diabolos cult. This is the first time Alexia has heard about the Shadow Garden and the cult. That's when Xenon makes a final struggle, taking a strength-boosting drug. After a painful wail, he completes his transformation like how Son Goku transforms into Super Saiyan in Dragon Ball. The drug has greatly improved Xenon's strength and confidence, and he is sure that he will win this battle. Soon Xenon launches a more lethal attack with his body glowing a blinding red, which makes Alexia unable to see the details of the battle. At that very moment, the long-awaited climax arrives. Shadow effortlessly blocks Xenon's assault with his magic glowing purple. Xenon is astonished to realize that Shadow's magical prowess is at least 10 times greater than his. Later, Shadow shares the enlightenment he earned from his struggling experience. In his original world, no matter how hard he practiced, he could never block the exploding nuclear bomb with his physical body. Consequently, he realizes that if he doesn't want to be killed by the nuclear bomb, he must make himself as powerful as the bomb. Before killing Xenon, Shadow says the last words to him, "I am a nuclear bomb." A huge explosion then directly breaks through the ground, illuminating the darkness with blinding light. Shadow 7 on a mission feels the strength of the leader Shadow, having only loyalty, adoration, and affection for him. Looking at the crater created by the explosion, Alexia is shortly distracted. She then picks up the sword on the ground, along with Alexia's confidence. Just then, Iris finds Alexia and hugs her. At this moment, Alexia doesn't alienate Iris, though her strength may still be not comparable to Iris. After the turmoil, the days return to normal. Alexia tells Shadow that she likes basic swordplay now, and she would change her attitude because she witnessed the power of the mysterious man. Alexia believes that one day her basic swordplay will also usher in a transformation. After that, Alexia gets blush and asks if Shadow is willing to have a formal relationship with her. As Shadow rejects her, he is slashed by Alexia's sword. Seriously injured, Shadow runs into a girl holding a book when he leaves school. The loving filter shows they seem to fall in love soon. At the same time, the girls of the Shadow 7 assemble for a meeting, praising Shadow's powerful strength. The long-term plan of the Shadow 7 is to investigate the cult of Diabolos, find their stronghold, and completely destroy the organization. Nonetheless, there is a more pressing issue waiting for them. That is, several liars pretending to be members of the Shadow Garden in public. Feeling furious, the Shadow 7 make up their mind to find this fraudulent group. Meanwhile, Iris gathers her most trusted knights because she wants to set up a new investigation department to investigate in depth the origin of the cult of Diabolos and the Shadow Garden. Not long after, some serial killers appear in the royal capital. They kill people around while pretending to be the Shadow Garden created by Shadow, which causes the atmosphere in the royal capital to be tense, and everyone is afraid that they will become the next victim. However, the tension only spreads to ordinary civilians. Many teachers and students from the school Shadow attends are quite powerful, and they never worry about criminals breaking in and killing, so they still live a noisy but happy life as usual. In contrast to them, Princess Iris is under pressure now. She convenes a meeting with her sister, Alexia, the school's vice headmaster, Ruslan, and Sherry, Ruslan's adopted daughter. It turns out that there is a recent breakthrough in the investigation of Alexia's kidnapping incidents. A cross-shaped artifact was found at the scene. Knowing Sherry is knowledgeable, Iris intends to seek her expertise in tracing the artifact's origins. Encouraged by her adoptive father Ruslan, Sherry accepts the task. Iris sends a newly formed Crimson Knight to protect Sherry, and Alexia also joins the investigation against the kidnappers. A new crisis is coming. After school, Shadow is dragged by two classmates to go shopping and happens to see a store launch a new product named chocolate. Shadow did not expect that there would be chocolate in this world, so he wants to buy some to taste. But the store has been viral, and there is a long queue. Just then, Nu, a staff at the store, approaches Shadow and invites him to participate in a questionnaire alone. Soon Shadow senses that something is wrong. Nu is not as enthusiastic as just now, ignoring him the whole time. Led by Nu, Shadow sees a group of respectful waitresses, as well as Gamma, an old acquaintance of Shadow. Only then does Shadow realize that the store is run by Shadow 7. Years ago, Shadow shared some details about his previous life on Earth with Gamma, which included recipes for making chocolate and various snacks. Surprisingly, the intelligent Gamma successfully creates the chocolate and uses her remarkable business talents to establish a large department store. Shadow is delighted to sit on the throne that Gamma prepares for him, with more than a dozen beautiful girls kneeling in front of him. At this moment, Shadow is like an emperor with a luxurious harem. Then, Gamma brings more good news to Shadow. She launched a home delivery shopping service for orders above 9.9 according to the sales method that Shadow talked about. Now her business has spread in and outside of the kingdom, earning an amazing fortune of up to 1,200,000,000 for Shadow. Gamma worships Shadow blindly, and even an ordinary act of Shadow will be interpreted by her as a wise one. For example, Shadow just comes to buy chocolate this time, but Gamma thinks he's here to investigate the imposters disguised as Shadow Garden. She then sends Nu to help Shadow investigate it. Until now, Shadow realizes someone has been impersonating them. Having spent too much time with Gamma, Shadow and his two classmates are going to miss curfew. While rushing to school, Shadow suddenly hears someone fighting nearby. Suspecting that the imposters may have appeared, he pretends to have a stomachache and tells his classmates he needs to relieve himself in the alley. At Shadow's urging, the two classmates decide to rush back to school first. They vow to keep Shadow's pooping on the street secret. At this moment, they seem like in the tragedy of being separated by death. After that, Shadow changes into his disguise. In the high air, he sees Alexia fighting the mysterious imposter. When Alexia just knocks down one, more reinforcements are coming. At the critical moment of Alexia under siege and being about to die, Shadow shows up and scares off the imposters with his super strength. Before Alexia can inquire about Shadow's identity and intentions, she collapses due to her severe injuries. Luckily, Shadow manages to catch up with the imposters and eliminates them, sparing only one survivor for Nu to interrogate. The imposter attempts to sneak up on Nu, who appears physically vulnerable, only to be defeated by her with a single sword. Shortly thereafter, news of the imposter's disappearance reaches their headquarters. A fierce battle is about to start. When Alexia reports her latest findings, Iris learns that someone is impersonating the Shadow Garden to kill people. Iris tells Alexia that she will eliminate all forces that undermine the stability of the kingdom, including Shadow Garden and the Diablo's cult. Unlike the princesses who have been worried about the kingdom, Shadow's classmates only worry that they will remain single until graduation. They give the chocolate they bought yesterday to the girls they like, only to get beaten up by one girl's fiancé and treated as a pervert by the other. In order to disguise himself as an ordinary person like his two classmates, Shadow casually gives his chocolate to the first girl he meets. But he doesn't expect that this girl is Sherry, the girl he has met once before. Learning that his daughter has been gifted chocolate, Ruslan explains to Sherry that it means love at first sight. Sherry, who has yet to experience romantic feelings, blushes and feels bashful discussing the topic. Just then, Ruslan begins to cough uncontrollably. It seems that he is suffering from a serious disease. After Ruslan leaves, Sherry begins to stare at the chocolate, unable to focus on researching the relic. She is thinking about how to respond to Shadow. At this moment, Shadow does not know that he is being targeted by Sherry. Nu has stolen a school uniform to infiltrate the school and is reporting to him. She interrogated the person who impersonated the Shadow Garden, but unfortunately, the imposter was brainwashed. Nu tells Shadow the cult of Diablos loves to brainwash its members, and that the imposters were probably to lure out the Shadow Garden. Recently, the Shadow Garden has just tracked down Rex, a named first child of the cult, who is secretly taking action in the royal capital. Shadow still feels that the cult of Diablos is just made up by himself, so he does not listen carefully to news intelligence the whole time. Not long ago, 2 of Shadow's classmates helped him sign up for the school tournament, which made Shadow a little excited, and he began to think about how to perfectly play ordinary in the game. New looks at the calm Shadow, recalling that Shadow 7 once said that Shadow can always think of battle plans quietly. She misunderstands that Shadow has already thought of a way to deal with the cult of Diablos, which makes her admire Shadow even more. With the commencement of the tournament, Shadow's sister, Clare, kicks off a series of victories, sparking discussions among students about who holds more strength between her and Rose, the student council president. Interestingly, Rose happens to face off against Shadow in a duel, which greatly pleases Shadow. He has come up with a flawless strategy for his disguise. For Shadow, Rose's movements appear as sluggish as a turtle. He takes a chance to throw a bag of plasma in his mouth and pretends to be defeated, vomiting blood. When the referee announces Rose as the winner, Shadow begins to play a weak man with a strong desire to win. He pretends to struggle to fight Rose again, and to get knocked out. The drama king acts to get up again and again after being knocked to the ground. In the end, the referee can't stand it and forcibly announces that Rose has won. Looking at Shadow, who still wants to continue fighting, Rose is getting attracted to this stubborn boy. Depressed, Shadow deliberately wraps several layers of bandages on his head to look like an injured person, and that's when Sherry finds him. Sherry gives Shadow the cookies she made as a gift in return, offering to start with friends, which means to get along slowly and then go further into lovers. The funny thing is that Shadow doesn't remember giving her chocolate, and he doesn't understand why Sherry comes to him. Just then, the vice principal Ruslan shows up. He has been secretly observing the crush of his adopted daughter. Shadow has investigated the great figures of the kingdom, so he knows the man in front of him is a master of both scholastic and martial arts. In order to play the role of an ordinary student, Shadow does not want to be involved with the daughter of the big man, so he decides to distance himself from Sherry as much as possible. But the reality is going in the opposite direction. Sherry can't help missing Shadow when she returns to the dormitory. Just then, the figure of Shadow's gossip girlfriend Alexia flashes to her mind. At the same time, Alexia is tasting a new popular coffee. She likes unsweetened black coffee the most. Suddenly, Sherry finds her. In contrast to Alexia, Sherry adds lots of sugar to her coffee, but the two girls share a similar preference for boys. Later, Sherry asks Alexia about the rumors between her and Shadow. Alexia clarifies that they're just pretending to be a couple, which puts a smile on Sherry's face. Seeing her expression, Alexia realizes that Sherry also has an affection for Shadow. As a result, the proud princess feels jealous for the first time in her life. Shadow doesn't know that he has become a rage among many girls. His classmates gossip every day while Shadow has no intention of joining the discussion at all. The only thing he cares about is when he can play dumb again. Soon the opportunity comes to Shadow when Rose presides over an election meeting for student council officials. On this day, the cult of Diablos launches an attack on the school, and a red light mask completely envelopes the school. Shadow is the first to realize that he can't use magic, and then several attackers rush into the classroom. Rose, being unable to use magic, is no match for them at all. At the critical moment, Shadow blocks the fatal blow for Rose. The drama king starts his show again. Rose mistakes that Shadow likes her, or you wouldn't fend off the attack at the risk of death. Shadow closes his eyes and his heart seems to stop beating, recalling their brief acquaintance. Rose can't help but cry. Members of the cult of Diablos then begin to force the students to gather. Just when they leave, Shadow wakes up. He skillfully uses his magic to feign death, effectively deceiving everyone, while most of the students and teachers cannot control their magic accurately because of the anti-magic barrier. However, Shadow stands out as an exception, as he possesses the unique ability to disassemble mana into smaller units and manipulate it at will, just as small fish can pass through the grid of a fishing net. Shadow comes to the rooftop because he can have the best view of the school from above. The situation of invaders, knights, and hostages is all under his surveillance. The anti-magic barrier is too terrifying, so Iris and the knights do not dare to venture in. Therefore, Shadow has to deal with all the invaders alone. Shadow is very excited. Though there were various games in his previous world, they were all virtual after all. The immersive battle that may cause death is what excites Shadow, who soon starts his hunt. Meanwhile, the members of the cult also take action. The Alea the Culbrex mentioned by New not long ago wants to kill Sherry and snatch the mysterious artifact from her. Fortunately, two high-ranking knights arrive in time and take the orders of Princess Iris to protect Sherry. These two knights are stronger than the regular students and teachers in the academy, and they buy Sherry some valuable time to flee. However, Sherry is so clumsy that she attracts the attention of the cult members several times. Fortunately, Shadow also notices Sherry, and every time the cult member discovers Sherry, Shadow will secretly kill them. The slow girl Sherry thinks she has never been discovered. Now she is going to her adoptive father Ruslan's room to look up the documents and investigate the anti-magic barrier. Interestingly, despite Shadow's assistance in thwarting the cult members along the way, the careless Sherry still stumbles without being pursued. As a result, Shadow can only show up to hold her. Upon reaching her, the first thing he says to Sherry is to take off the noisy slippers she wears. Safeguarded by Shadow, Sherry successfully traces the origin of the barrier. It is said that there is an ancient artifact called the Eye of Avarice, which possesses the unique ability to absorb the magic of nearby people. Furthermore, it can memorize the mana characteristics of each person, enabling those intruders to use mana without being restrained. Sherry also discovers that once the Eye of Avarice absorbs too much mana, it will release all at once, and the entire school will be completely destroyed. The only thing that can deal with the Eye of Avarice now is the artifact in Sherry's hand. But there are still two problems. One is that Sherry still needs some materials to make the artifact effective, and the other is they haven't figured out a way to get close to the Eye of Avarice. Shadow sets out to help Sherry find materials, while the arrogant Rex does not know that he is about to encounter a strong enemy. Shadow. Rex is reporting to a mysterious man that several high-ranking warriors have been killed. The mysterious man in strange armor immediately realizes that the murderer must be from the Shadow Garden. He then arranges for Rex to take for assistance to catch the lurker. Rex is casual at first, but when 4 of his companions are killed in an instant, he finally begins to panic. Shadow is so fast that Rex can't see his face, but is beaten the whole time. He retreats to a classroom, where he is horrified to find that there are full of the corpses of his companions. Just then, Shadow attacks him from behind. After dealing with Rex, Shadow goes to Sherry's room to collect materials, where he happens to meet Nu, who then reports to Shadow that the kingdom's reinforcements have a dispute over the command, and most members of the Shadow 7 are now absent from the royal capital. Learning of this, Shadow remains calm. Facing a formidable organization alone seems to make him even more excited. Shadow meticulously outlines his strategy for the impending confrontation, further elevating Nu's admiration for him. Little does she realize that Shadow's knowledge about the Eye of Avarice is a result of Sherry's diligent research efforts. As the atmosphere in the academy is getting tense, a fierce war is about to break out. Shadow brings Sherry the materials she needs, and Sherry finally creates a special device that can restrain the Eye of Avarice. The girl comes to the hall through a secret passage, and she throws the device hard at the leader of the intruders. In an instant, the red light that enveloped the school disappears, and the students, finding some of their magic power recovered, immediately rise to resist. At this moment, Shadow finds the leader of the intruder, whom he recognizes as the adoptive father Ruslan of Sherry, based on the way he walks. Confident in his ability to eliminate Shadow effortlessly, Ruslan discards his disguise and proceeds to unveil his perfect plan with an air of self-assuredness. When he was young, Ruslan was a formidable swordmaster. However, he later succumbed to an unusual disease that severely diminished his strength. Learning that the Eye of Avarice may cure his disease, Ruslan found Sherry's mother, hoping the scholar could unlock the secrets of the artifact and provide a cure for his disease. However, Sherry's mother rejected Ruslan because she thought the eye was too dangerous. Then, Ruslan brutally killed her. The vicious man also pretended to be kind and adopted Sherry, and since then, Ruslan has used this adopted daughter to continue the study of the eye. Shadow dresses as the leader of Shadow Garden, preparing to kill the scum. Ruslan, who then senses the power of the enemy and immediately activates the eye. Ruslan has discovered that the device that controls the Eye of Avarice can emit stronger power, but Sherry doesn't know that. That's why Ruslan could use Sherry to help him research the relic. At this moment, Ruslan has the same great power as when he was young, but he is not provoking an ordinary swordsman. Shadow kills Ruslan brutally, just like how Ruslan killed Sherry's mother. It is tit for tat. As Shadow is going to leave, he encounters Sherry, who is overwhelmed by the death of her adoptive father and fails to identify the Shadow Garden's leader as Shadow. Fearing that revealing her adoptive father's true nature as a villain would only compound her sorrow, Shadow quietly leaves. After the incident, Sherry decides to study in another city. Shadow is also about to leave the city. Alpha writes to inform her companions to assemble at the sacred city, where she discovered important information. Here I'm gonna focus on Epsilon from Shadow 7, who is very dissatisfied with her figure. Therefore, she often uses slimes that can change shape to disguise her plump pectorals, and she is ready to seduce Shadow with her disguised sexy body. All girls in Shadow 7 are very obsessed with Shadow, which causes them to be jealous of each other. Beta notices that Epsilon is using slime to disguise her figure and immediately throws back her shoulders to show her F cup. they decide to have a competition in the sacred city. Interestingly, their destination is the same as Princess Alexia's, as she is preparing for a significant event in the same city. She convinces Iris to accompany her to Gamma's department store for some shopping before their departure. Seeing the sexy lingerie, Iris is extremely shocked. She is very conservative and adamantly stops her sister from wearing it. But Alexia doesn't listen to her sister's advice at all. She is very confident in her figure. Speechless, Iris suspects that her sister is in love. Actually, the student council president Rose is the one in love. When Shadow blocked an attack for her, Rose mistakenly thought Shadow liked her, and since then, she has followed Shadow wherever he goes. Shadow runs into Rose on his way to the sacred city, and Rose surely follows him, as she would even go to the restroom with Shadow. Meanwhile, Shadow is thinking women will only impede his fighting efficiency, but Shadow worries that if he tells the truth, he will be hacked to death by Rose. After all, once a woman is angry, she is 10,000 times more terrifying than the Demon King. After arriving at the sacred city, Rose drags Shadow to a cartoonist's book signing session, where Shadow is shocked to see the cartoonist's works. A series of popular manga on Earth, such as Dragon Ball, One Piece, Naruto, Demon Slayer, and so on. Shadow suspects that there are other transmigrationers in this world, and when he takes the manga to meet the author, he sees an acquaintance. The author turns out to be Beta from Shadow 7. Beta has always liked literature, and Shadow once talked to her about the manga he had read on Earth, but he didn't expect the girl would copy them. Shadow has to give up the idea that there might be other transmigrationers. Instead, he goes to a hot spring to remove the fatigue after a long journey. This is a mixed hot spring where he encounters Alexia. The princess exudes confidence in her physique and playfully strikes various poses to attract Shadow's attention. However, Shadow remains nonchalant, not even bothering to open his eyes, and teases Alexia, asking if she's attracted by his big thing. Alexia is taken aback by Shadow's cheekiness. Soon the largest church is hosting a big event in the sacred city, where each register fighter will summon a hero's soul that defeated the Demon King Diablos while alive. The stronger the fighter is, the stronger soul he can summon. While attending the event as a guest, Alexia is struck by the huge pectorals of Beta. In terms of the body figure, the proud princess has completely lost to Beta. Alexia vows to exercise her pectoralis muscles when she returns, and then an accident happens. Rose secretly signed up for Shadow, who is worried about exposing his real strength once he summons the strongest hero. Hence, he secretly transforms into the leader of Shadow Garden to sabotage the event. To everyone's surprise, Shadow summons the Calamity Witch Aurora, who is rumored to be as terrifying as Diablos. Even such a strong opponent loses to Shadow while he hasn't exposed his full strength. Following Aurora's defeat, a portal appears, sucking Shadow in. In this very moment, Alpha comes with the members of the Shadow Garden, successfully captures several church leaders, and Beta, who has taken on the guise of a renowned cartoonist. After that, they venture into the portal. Intrigued and curious, Alexia and Rose also follow them to the portal, but Alexia accidentally falls on Beta during transportation and coincidentally touches Beta's pectoralis muscle, leaving her feeling immensely frustrated once more. Alpha doesn't make trouble for Alexia and Rose, because she has more important tasks during this trip. According to the ancient documents she found, this place is called Sanctuary, where the left hand of the Demon King Diablos is sealed. The next words of Alpha surprise everyone. The hero who defeated Diablos, Olivier, was actually the ancestor of Alpha, and she knows the secrets of the cult of Diablos. Alpha then destroys the Sanctuary's magical core, allowing Olivier's sealed memory to reappear. The Diablos cult obtained some of the Demon King's cells, which they tried to use to increase human power, but most of the experiments failed, and Olivier was a rare survivor at the time. The cult drove Olivier to cut off Diablo's left arm, but their real goal was to crack Diablo's amazing regenerative abilities. Through extensive study of Diablo's left arm, the cult managed to create a drug promising everlasting life. However, this drug had two drawbacks. It necessitated an annual dosage to sustain its benefits and could only be produced at a limited rate of 12 beats per year. Consequently, only the elite 12 knights of the round of the cult were granted the privilege to take the drug. One of the church leaders, Nilsson, has another identity as the Knight of Round, who has been continuously researching to overcome drug deficiencies. One reason why Shadow 7 became monsters when they were little is that they are descendants of heroes, while the other is they were about to be the follow-up experiments of the cult. The exposed Nelson controls the enchantment of Sanctuary and randomly teleports the people around Alpha, leading only the Orc Delta in Shadow 7 by Alpha's side. Nelson is very confident and facing them. As the closer he gets to Sanctuary Center, the stronger his power is, while Alpha and the others will be sucked away from their magic and lose their combat power. In an instant, Nelson splits into countless copies of himself ready to kill his opponents. However, the Knight of Round didn't expect that Delta alone could kill all of his doppelgangers without Alpha even making a move. Although Epsilon is transported elsewhere, she maintains her confidence in the capabilities of her companions. Rather than rushing to assist Alpha, she dedicates her time to studying ancient documents with others. As their magical power is sucked away by the sanctuary, the slime-based equipment they wear is also impacted. Consequently, others notice the slime covering Epsilon's disguised pectoral muscles, yet they choose to ignore it, fearing that Epsilon would kill them. After gathering the information they need, they quickly leave the center to join Alpha. Meanwhile, Nelson, seeing that his opponent is getting stronger, releases the Seal Olivier for a decisive battle. But Alpha has already got the information she needs, so she does not intend to continue the battle at all, directly leaving with her companions. Nelson, fearing the strength of Alpha and her companions, does not dare to chase after them. Just then, Sanctuary is alerted that someone has broken into the central area, and the one turns out to be Shadow, along with the Calamity Witch Aurora, who is only part of the soul and does not have a complete memory. She was sealed by the Diablos cult in Sanctuary for research, and when Shadow met this poor woman, he decided to help her regain her freedom. Now, the biggest problem for Shadow is the Olivier brought by Nelson. In Aurora's mutilated memories, Olivier is quite strong. She tells Shadow that they can't defeat this formidable enemy, but Shadow's power far exceeds her expectations, and he eliminates Olivier with just a few injuries. Suddenly, Nelson summons countless Olivier's copies. Incredibly, he possesses such a large number of ancient heroes' copies. While this circumstance might startle and intimidate others, for Shadow, dealing with an adversary of such a level only develops his excitement. When confronting absolute power, all forms of deception become futile. Shadow concentrates his magical power to break the spell, obliterates the entire sanctuary with a single sword, and kills all the replicas. Now, only Aurora is left by Shadow's side, but soon the mutilated soul will dissipate. In fact, she knew from the beginning that she would disappear once she left Sanctuary, but she wanted to do it anyway. Before disappearing completely, Aurora asks Shadow to find her main body to complete a secret commission. The event this time shocks Alexia, who can no longer estimate how strong Alpha and her companions are. Then, she teams up with Beta and Rose to investigate the shared intelligence from Shadow Garden. I wonder how Alexia will feel if she knows Beta is a member of Shadow 7. After that, Alexia goes to meet with her sister Iris. As the churches on the mainland are seriously infiltrated by the undercover agents of the Diablos cult, and Shadow Garden has not taken a stand yet, Alexia suggests that Iris must find out the conspiracy behind these forces. Regrettably, the truth will forever remain elusive to Alexia, as Shadow, the leader of Shadow Garden, is too difficult to see through. Lately, he has come up with an idea, that is, creating a fabricated identity and joining in the Bushin Festival tournament organized by the church. He intends to create a weak appearance with soft slime and triumph over opponents one by one to advance, making the audience's mental activity change from initial disregard to eventual astonishment. The day before the competition, Shadow packs a lot of food at McDonald's. Shadow 7 has developed a lot of food and goods on Earth based on what Shadow saw in his past life. When Shadow is about to go home for a big meal, he bumps into Rose on the way. From their conversation, it's revealed that Rose's country pursues art rather than force, and Rose practices martial arts against the king's order because she was saved by a mysterious person when she was a child, and since then, she has longed for the power to protect others. But Rose doesn't know the mysterious person is actually Shadow. Soon the tournament begins, but two accidents occur. One is that Shadow's disguised low-level fighter keeps winning, making the audience completely unbelievable. The other accident is related to Rose, who absconds after stabbing her fiancé. Alexia comes to Beta. She pulls her by the collar and asks her to investigate what happened to Rose. Beta reluctantly agrees while tidying up her clothes, looking like she doesn't want to get involved in the trouble. In fact, Shadow Garden has been keeping an eye on Rose, and Alexia receives Rose's movement just after leaving Beta. During the time of Rose's disappearance, the tournament continues. When Shadow is watching the game, he encounters a mysterious woman named Beatrix who is looking for her missing niece. Shadow finds that she looks exactly like Alpha, and the combat power she inadvertently displayed is quite strong. At present, Shadow is busy disguising himself to participate in the competition, leaving him with limited interaction with Beatrix. After changing his appearance, Shadow faces his adversary, a formidable man named Goldie. Although notably skilled and possessing considerable strength, Goldie will avoid encountering powerful adversaries, thereby maintaining an undefeated record and is known as the Myth of Undefeated. Golden shows his strongest trick, trying to win both the competition and the worship of others. Just then, Shadow sneezes, causing the weapon to poke Goldie and thus defeats him. Shadow once again disguises his victory as an accident. Meanwhile, covered in injuries, Rose is unable to hold on. As she recalls, the truth finally becomes clear. Not long ago, Rose went to see her father, but to find her fiancé Perv took control of the old king. Rose decisively attacked Perv, only to be framed by Perv and his accomplices. While Rose is wanted, she also faces another tricky problem. Like Alpha, Rose is also a descendant of heroes, and she has been hovering out of control at any time after being injured. That's when Rose meets someone who changes her life. Shadow, dressing up as the leader of Shadow Garden, helps her back to her senses, for which Rose is so grateful that she decides to continue her unfinished mission. After rescuing Rose, Shadow changes back to an inconspicuous appearance to join in a competition. This time, Shadow faces a formidable adversary, Ambrose, who has been closely watching Shadow's previous matches, and believes that his victories seem to be achieved by accidents, but he actually had some hidden attacks that were too fast for ordinary onlookers to discover. Ambrose knows that Shadow is not easy to deal with, so she uses her strongest tricks right away. However, the gap in strength between them is too big, and Shadow creates another accident to easily defeat her. Perv, who is watching the battle, gets very concerned about this and immediately orders to investigate this mysterious contestant. When Ambrose is getting treated after the competition, she offers a generous deal to invite Shadow to join her home country because she admires him very much. However, Shadow has his powerful Shadow Empire, so the temptations offered by Ambrose fail to impress him. Soon comes the day of the final of the tournament, during when Perv intends to control the king to assassinate Iris's father, and thus provokes a war between the two countries to seize power while the chaos is in place. However, there are many variables in his plan, the first of which is that Iris invites Beatrix as an audience. Perv has heard of this woman, who is nicknamed Martial Goddess and is stronger than Iris. Therefore, Perv kind of fears Beatrix. Another variable is Shadow, who successfully disguises himself as a passerby until he reaches the finals. Throughout the duel, Princess Iris keeps warning herself. Regardless of the defensive stances she adopts, she is plagued by the persistent fear of being killed. Always being proud, Iris cannot accept to give up the competition without fighting. Thus, she performs her strongest blow, only to have her opponent effortlessly seize control of her neck. Consequently, victory is swiftly determined within a single round. Nobody can estimate how powerful Shadow is, and Perv missed this variable to cause the plan to fail. Just then, Rose appears in the audience. She can't bear to see her father become a puppet controlled by Perv, and finally ends the life of her loved one with her own hands. After that, she is ready to kill herself to follow her father. At this moment, Shadow rushes over in the form of the leader of Shadow Garden. Such a close encounter reminds Rose of a past. She was once kidnapped when she was a child. Fortunately, a mysterious person came to her rescue. Rose senses a familiar feeling in the head of Shadow Garden, and she is sure that he is the mysterious person back then. Encouraged by Shadow, Rose perks up, but then Beatrix suddenly attacks Shadow. Soon, Iris joins the battle to fight Shadow, using an ancient weapon to increase her strength. Beatrix initiates the battle because of her admiration for the strong, while Iris is trying to eliminate Shadow, the hidden danger for the kingdom. Yet, they underestimate Shadow's prowess. Despite the considerable might of the female warriors, they find themselves at a distinct disadvantage when Shadow takes them a little seriously. Although Iris and Beatrix perform the best of their lives, they are ultimately defeated by Shadow. Frustrated but undeterred, Iris warns Shadow that the kingdom's knights are rushing here. She intends to use their numerical superiority to consume Shadow's energy. Undeterred at all the warning, Shadow unleashes a huge circle of purple light that envelopes the city. By demonstrating his strength, Shadow tells Iris that if he wants the entire city, everyone will be killed in a second. Shadow is gone when the harsh light dissipates. Iris and Beatrix are never his end, as he is always on his way to finding a stronger enemy. Following that day, the members of Shadow 7 continue to activate throughout the continent. Some engage in business to secure funding for the organization, while others are dedicated to intelligence-gathering tasks. Rose, in response to Alpha's invitation, becomes an official member of Shadow Garden. During her initial training session, her attire is completely torn apart by the instructor's assault. Perhaps this signifies her farewell to her previous life. Here brings the end of the first season of the Eminence in Shadow. Because of Shadow's recent impressive victories, the members of Shadow Garden admire him more and more. Interestingly, since all the current members of the organization are women, their feelings toward Shadow are complicated. Other than admiration, there's a lot of love mixed in. Pretty much all of them dream of marrying their fearless leader. During a meeting, Shadow just casually mentions that he smells something strange, and all the girls freak out, checking themselves for body odor. But what Shadow actually meant was the smell of a conspiracy. Lately, he's noticed a huge amount of money being funneled into a place called Lawless City. It's a city belongs to no kingdom, full of criminals and evil creatures. Then, a red moon appears in the sky, which is an augury of bloodshed. Shadow suspects the source of the disturbance lies within Lawless City, so he decides to go investigate it himself. Coincidentally, his sister Clare also decides to go to Lawless City, dragging her brother Shadow with her to hunt vampires. She wants to help her little brother rack up some accomplishments to make it easier for him to join the Midgar's Night Order. Shadow's done a great job keeping his true power a secret. Aside from the members of Shadow Garden, hardly anyone knows he's a total powerhouse. That's why Clare still thinks her brother is just an average guy and worries a lot about his future. The city is a total mess. While Shadow is out walking alone, he gets jumped by a bunch of thieves. Seriously, it's like Gotham City out here. Shadow gets so mad that he uses his magic to steal everything from the thieves. Then, as the red moon appears, the ghouls start attacking people like crazy. These creatures are vampire minions, and humans bitten by them turn into ghouls. That's when a vampire hunter named Mary shows up and slays the ghouls. She warns Shadow that with the red moon appearing, the city will be facing more dangers. Shadow thinks Mary is super cool, and her words ignite his fighting spirit. He sneaks off, puts on his shadow outfit, and starts hunting down ghouls across the city. Along the way, he stays a prostitute named Marie. He recites Mary's dramatic line, urging Marie to run, and then leaves like a total badass. The chaos is a nightmare for everyone else, but the beginning of Marie's freedom. Meanwhile, Clare is sobbing over a faceless corpse, thinking it's her brother, until she encounters Mary. She figures out that Shadow is still alive. Rumor has it, he's been captured by vampires and might be used as a sacrifice to resurrect the Blood Queen. The Queen's sealing is a closely guarded secret, so Clare doesn't know much about it. But instead of wasting time on asking Mary about the details, Clare immediately decides to team up with her to rescue Shadow. Actually, no one has the power to turn Shadow into a sacrifice. At this moment, he's just managed to sabotage a battle between two powerful figures, Yukime from Fox Therianthrope and Juggernaut known as the Tyrant. These two, along with Elizabeth, are the three major leaders of Lawless City, and there's always been tension among them. Shadow shows off his overwhelming strength, which makes both of them back off. Before leaving, he recites Mary's words again. With red moon appearing, the city is becoming more and more dangerous. It's just a random line he picked up, but it actually puts the two big bosses on edge. But Juggernaut isn't giving up his plan to kill Elizabeth, then Yukime, and take over Lawless City. While he's out slaughtering vampires, Mary and Clare run into him. They're smart enough to not mess with someone like him. Unfortunately, Juggernaut has sensed them, instantly leaving them both severely injured. To recover her strength, Mary suddenly kisses Clare and drinks the blood from her lips. Sadly, even after the power-up, she's still no match for Juggernaut. In the nick of time, Shadow shows up and blasts Juggernaut away with a single strike. Once again, he repeats Mary's words, telling the girls to run. Mary is stunned. These words are so familiar to her. After Shadow leaves, Mary, having just shared a life-or-death moment with Clare, decides to finally reveal her secret. She begins to tell the story of the dark times 1,000 years ago. Back then, vampires ruled the world. But once humans discovered that vampires scared sunlight, the tables turned. Vampires were hunted down and nearly wiped out by humans. Mary was once the maid of Elizabeth, and they were both vampires. Different from other vampires, Elizabeth dreamed of peace between humans and vampires. Under her leadership, vampires in her domain stopped drinking blood and even overcame their fear of sunlight. But Elizabeth herself remained an exception, still craving blood, still fearing the sun. Then came Red Moon, a time when vampires would gain immense power. Crimson, Elizabeth's most loyal servant, secretly spiked her dinner with human blood, which made Elizabeth go berserk. For the next 3 days, she nearly destroyed 3 kingdoms. In a moment of clarity, Elizabeth tried to end her own life to prevent further destruction. But she didn't turn into ash like other vampires. It was as if she simply fell into a deep sleep. That's when Crimson reappeared and took his body for himself. Now, 1,000 years later, the Red Moon has returned. Mary suspects that Crimson is trying to awaken Elizabeth, the so-called Blood Queen. And she's right, Crimson is in the middle of a ritual, planning to revive Elizabeth and make her his bride. That's when Shadow suddenly shows up and kills Crimson on the spot. Looking at the dead Crimson and the boy who has been turned into a sacrifice, Shadow assumes the final boss isn't here, and thus leaves the spot to look for the boss. Unbeknownst to him, this decision puts his sister in extreme danger. Mary and Clare arrive at the scene just as Elizabeth awakens. Unconsciously, the Blood Queen instinctively bites Clare for human blood. Thankfully, members of Shadow Garden show up just in time to save Clare. But the crisis isn't over. Elizabeth's power is off the charts, completely dominating the battlefield. Then Yukime and Juggernaut join a fight, thinking they can handle it. However, they totally underestimate Elizabeth's strength. Elizabeth by herself steamrolls every single one of them, and Juggernaut nearly dies. Meanwhile, some rotting flesh starts growing on Claire's body, but she is in unconsciousness. In a coma, Claire sees a woman named Aurora, who turns out to be the Witch of Calamity. Out of gratitude to Shadow, Aurora sets up a special mark on Claire's hand. With this mark, Claire's wounds heal instantly in real world, and the rot vanishes. Aurora then takes over Claire's body and fights Elizabeth head-on. They are among the strongest characters in this anime, but Claire's body can't take such strong power, so Aurora won't go full force. But the witch knows she doesn't have to defeat the Blood Queen. She just needs to buy time until Shadow comes back. In this world, if there's a problem that can't be solved, it's only because Shadow hasn't shown up yet. With a dramatic entrance, Shadow finally returns, and what follows is the most epic fight we've seen so far: Shadow versus the Blood Queen. Even Yukime and Juggernaut become mere spectators. Their clash shakes the entire city, presenting a visual feast of overwhelming power under the blood-red moon. Then, as Shadow calmly declares, "Game over," a mysterious energy sweeps through the area. The powerful energy goes beyond imagination, transforming all the ghouls back into humans. With the crisis over, Elizabeth regains her senses, and Mala's city finally returns to peace. Shadow and his sister are on a train heading home, where a brand new problem is waiting for them. At night, Mitsugoshi Company under Shadow Garden gets attacked by a gang of bandits. They rob the precious goods, and even go as far as tearing the clothes off the young employees. It turns out that these bandits are hired by a merchant named Garter, who specializes in sabotaging his rivals. But this time, he messed with the wrong people. There are no weaklings in Shadow Guardian, and what follows is a massacre. Shadow senses the threat from Garter, but instead of eliminating the enemy by brute force, he decides to win through strategy. Garter has allied with many other companies, so Shadow teams up with Yukime. On top of that, Shadow has noticed that besides violent raids, Garter has been involved in various acts of plagiarism. Designs for clothes, banks, currency, and more that Shadow brought from Earth have all been copied by Garter. However, the currency issued by Garter is of poor quality, which makes it easy to counterfeit. Shadow immediately comes up with a plan to fake Garter's money to trigger a credit crisis, so that people will be rushing to Garter's banks, demanding to exchange their notes for gold. A massive bank run, everyone's worst nightmare. After finalizing his plan, Shadow rewards himself with a bowl of ramen. That's when he runs into his subordinate Delta. She is one of the 7 Shadows, Shadow's strongest followers. This wolf girl has a pure heart and a simple wish to help Shadow find 100 wives to spread his powerful bloodline to conquer the world. But honestly, Shadow won't be lacking of wives. The Witch of Calamity, the Blood Queen, the Princess of a Kingdom, there are even more than 100 amazing women willing to marry him. Just right now, Shadow has something more important to deal with. Once the fake banknotes spread through the market, the one taking the hit won't just be Garter. It could also impact the Mitsugoshi Company owned by Shadow Garden. Banks are still a new concept for most people in this world. If a credit crisis breaks out, everyone's going to exchange their cash for gold, and a market-wide bank run is inevitable. Of course, Shadow has planned for this. He wants Shadow Garden to be more than just fighters, and he aims to use this mission as a training ground to deepen their understanding of financial warfare. To make the experience more realistic, Shadow takes on a new identity, John. Aside from Yukime, no one knows that this John is actually the Shadow himself. Soon, members of Shadow Garden track down a train suspected of transporting counterfeit banknotes. But the one waiting for them is none other than Shadow, who disguised as John. He defeats his own subordinates and even feeds them false information. While Shadow is away, Shadow Garden is managed by Alpha, the leader of the 7 Shadows. She refuses to accept failure and sends Delta to chase after the culprit, John. But unbeknownst to her, John is the leader Shadow, the man even the Blood Queen couldn't defeat, let alone Delta. Interestingly, this wolf girl figures out that John is Shadow by using her nose. This puts Shadow in an awkward position. He knows Delta is too simple and honest to keep a secret. So, to make sure his plan to train the members of Shadow Garden continues smoothly, he sends Delta off on a mission to Lawless City to hunt down Juggernaut. That way, Delta won't have the chance to tell Alpha the truth. As for Juggernaut, the man once attacked Clare. Even if he dies, Shadow won't feel guilty about it. Delta's sudden disappearance shocks Alpha. At the scene, the members of Shadow Garden find Delta's bell ornament from her tail. Among the 7 Shadows, Delta is the purest and most fearless. She would never run away, so her disappearance means only one thing, that she's dead. Along with the grief, a burning fury starts to rise within Alpha's heart. This time, Alpha decides to take action herself to kill the John. As Shadow's strongest subordinate, she has sharp observation and deep understanding of Shadow. During their brief clash, she quickly realizes that John is Shadow. However, she has no idea why Shadow did all this. Shadow gives her no answer, just simply knocking her away. Now, the counterfeit operation is reaching its climax. Shadow and Yukime have exchanged the fake banknotes for a mountain of gold from Garter's company. Before the final assault begins, Yukime shares a secret with Shadow. Behind Garter stands a man named Gitan. He wears many faces. He is Yukime's husband, and also the man who wiped out her entire family. It took Yukime years to rise from the lawless city. For her, this partnership with Shadow wasn't just about making money. What she truly wants is revenge on Gitan. As the snow falls heavily, Yukime's voice is colder than the winter night. This entire scheme, masterminded by Shadow, was supposed to go off without a hitch, but a string of unexpected events flips the table. First, Shadow Garden discovered that Gitan is a member of the cult of Diablos. He also had an operation of counterfeits, but his goal was to crash the kingdom's economy. However, before he could take action, Shadow has already exchanged a massive amount of fake banknotes for real gold. Then comes another twist. Beta reports that one of her subordinates accidentally cracked the notebook Shadow wrote in Japanese, where it records his entire counterfeiting operation and the place where the gold locates. Of course, since everyone in Shadow Garden worships Shadow as a god, they instantly assume he has foreseen the cult's conspiracy and crafted the plan to save them all. Alpha is thrilled. To her, this is proof that Shadow has never abandoned them. And just in time, Delta returns from her mission. With 7 Shadows reunion, these girls are full of joy. Meanwhile, Shadow has no clue his notebook has been deciphered. When he arrives at the secret vault where he stashes the gold, he freezes. Not a single coin left, not even a piece of silver. Furious, Shadow can't just let someone walk off with his hard-earned fortune. Convinced that Gitan is the one behind the theft, he storms off to hunt the man down, only to stumble across Yukime being attacked. Her revenge attempt didn't go as planned. Gitan is stronger than she expected, and has drugs provided by the cult to power himself up. Fortunately, Shadow is strong enough to turn the table. He defeats Gitan, demanding he confess everything. Gitan, however, is confused. He has no idea what Shadow is talking about. On his last breath, he asks Shadow to protect the thing he cares about the most, while Shadow naturally assumes this is the code for the gold is hidden in the mountains. With Gitan gone, Shadow asks Yukime to leave first while he stays behind to date the gold. But unbeknownst to him, what Gitan cared most about wasn't gold. It was Yukime. Long ago, Gitan was a powerless boy, oppressed and manipulated. He was seduced by the cult's lies, and in his desperation, he committed the unforgivable, killing Yukime's mother. His short life was a mess of guilt, regret, and broken emotions. After all that intense action, we finally get a breather. 2 of Shadow's classmates plan to go picking up girls, and they want Shadow to come along. They go to Shadow's dorm, only to discover 6 premium tickets from Mitsugoshi Hot Springs land. These boys start to think about meeting ladies in the hot springs. Immediately, they decide to take the tickets and head out to the hot springs. However, they run into an employee of Shadow Garden, and are then taken to Mitsugoshi's office. It turns out that the tickets they took are special passes from Alpha, and she gave them exclusively to Shadow. Now that those tickets end up in the hands of Shadow's classmates, the 7 Shadows think it's Shadow's secret way of asking them out. So, the girls decide to send 3 of them, disguised as ordinary girls, to go on the date. All 7 of them have dreams of marrying Shadow, so they each want the chance to get closer to him. Their love for Shadow is absolutely wild. They don't care if it's a harem as long as they're the one to bear his child. These elite warriors, who once defeated even a vampire queen, are now competing for the date slot and nearly fall apart from internal chaos. In the end, they settle things the only fair way they know, a game of rock paper scissors to decide who is the goddess chosen bride of Shadow. However, the girls who lost the game end up cheating their way in. Some show up in sexy outfits to boost their charm, while others use magic tools to enhance their body figures. After spending a long period dealing with constant issues, the Shadow Garden finally gets a break in the Mitsugoshi Hot Springs land. The Hot Springs land is basically the Disneyland of this world, with great food, full-on entertainment, and all types of baths, from public pools to gender-separated spas. Shadow's 2 classmates try to have a peek at the girls, but they seriously underestimate these girls' power and sharp senses. They are strong enough to give even a demon lord a tough fight. The good times flew by in a flash, and soon evening falls. Even they didn't see Shadow here. The 7 Shadows believe that this entire vacation was a thoughtful gift from Shadow, so their love and gratitude for him grows stronger. But where is Shadow? It turns out that he is in Mala City and currently stays in a hotel run by Marie, who, if you remember, is the prostitute he once saved. Now she's trying to make an honest living running a legit business. As for Shadow, he's out on a new mission, hunting for a worthy next stage. Ordinary enemies just don't excite him anymore. Even without Shadow, Shadow Garden keeps moving. Recently, Perv, one of the core members of the cult, has taken over a city. He's now ruling a kingdom, waging wars around. Shadow Garden sends a squad to investigate his latest scheme. Rose is also in the team. She is Shadow's senior schoolmate and was once engaged to Perv. After he got her royal dad killed, she's been on a non-stop revenge mission. Soon, Shadow Garden has a major discovery. The cult once sent a bunch of elites, including some high-ranking members, on a mission. They used the royal blood of the Queen Reina to unlock an ancient ruin for a mysterious ring. Rose is overwhelmed to see her mother again, but when she hears her allies planning to steal the ring, she panics, worrying Reina might get hurt. She turns against Shadow Garden and does everything she can to protect her. The Seven Shadows soon receive news of the mission's failure and how complicated the situation is. In Rose's homeland, not all ministers are loyal to Perv. Some are secretly backing Rose, hoping she can rise up and challenge him. Shadow reads about it in the newspaper, and he's thrilled. He decides to help Rose take the throne, not just out of justice, of course. Maybe he also sees it as a chance to show off in the fight for throne. But just as he's about to leave, something unexpected happens. 3 menacing men show up at Marie's hotel demanding protection money. Again, she's already broke and can't pay, but these duds don't let her go, trying to make her pay with her body. Shadow, staying in character, can only play the helpless weakling to defend her. Even he has to bear getting stripped and beaten up. As both Shadow and a nobody, Shadow saves Marie twice, which gives her hope to keep going in this cruel world. After saying goodbye, Shadow changes his identity to make his enemies pay. Meanwhile, those scummy men plot to kidnap Marie and make her their slave. Overhearing this, Shadow is furious, turning them into 3 dead bodies. Soon after, Marie receives a huge sack of gold. She catches a glimpse of the Shadow's silhouette disappearing into the distance, wrapped in a warm and mysterious glow. Next stop, Shadow rushes to support his comrades. As he heals the wounded members of Shadow Garden, they rise again and wipe out the cult's elites. Then comes news that totally pisses him off. Rose is marrying Perv. Shadow can't believe Rose would throw away her chance to be queen while choosing to marry that scumbag. Of course, Shadow won't just accept the failure of his plan to take the spotlight in the battle for the throne crumbles. So, he decides to change everything with his power. The members of Shadow Garden are shocked to see Shadow being so angry. They assume Rose is about to face a hellish fate, but Shadow quickly regains his composure. With Epsilon's help, he enters the palace. Rose's kingdom holds the arts in high esteem, and Epsilon, having trained under Shadow, has become a world-renowned pianist. Her esteemed position often brings her invitations to perform for the royal family. Seizing the opportunity, she sticks closely to Shadow, hoping to deepen their bond. Just then, Perv suddenly shows up, with a problem in tow. Epsilon claims Shadow as her student, but Perv, ever the cautious schemer, grows suspicious. He's afraid someone might try to steal Rose from him, so he's wary of every outsider. Under Perv's request, Shadow performs a piano piece to prove he really is Epsilon's disciple. His masterful performance stuns the audience. After the performance, Shadow casually swipes the noble's jewelry, including a mysterious ring Perv recently acquired. Then, Shadow pretends to be interested in seeing around the palace, with the real intention to scout the layout. A maid named Margaret volunteers to guide him. Her voluptuous body even outshines Epsilon. Taking advantage of her alone time with Shadow, she clings to him non-stop, clearly hoping to marry the charming pianist. Shadow takes the chance to ask Margaret where Rose's room is, but just as he's about to head there, a soldier blocks his path. Jealous of Margaret's attention toward Shadow, the soldier challenges him to a duel. Were it not for more important matters, Shadow might have taught him a permanent lesson. Rose is thrilled to see Shadow. She has no idea he's Shadow, the leader of Shadow Garden. She simply just likes this junior boy. Misunderstanding his motives, she thinks Shadow infiltrated the palace to stop her wedding out of love. While Rose is deeply touched, she insists on going through with the marriage to Perv. Shadow, sensing something is off, secretly eavesdrops and uncovers the truth. It turns out that it was Perv that threatens Rose to marry him, or else he will kill Reina. After learning the truth, Shadow decides to rescue Reina to free Rose from her worries. Just then, Margaret shows up, holding onto Shadow tightly. It seems that when a woman falls in love, her strength becomes terrifying. After all, even the Blood Queen couldn't hold onto Shadow. Epsilon soon senses threat and rushes over to grab Shadow's other hand. Shadow manages to escape only by unleashing a top-tier spell. While searching for Reina, he accidentally discovers a shocking truth that Reina is having an affair with Perv. Worse, she plans to murder her own daughter once Perv marries Rose and gains the throne. Shadow can't believe that this fantasy anime world suddenly turned into a soap opera straight out of Korea or Thailand. Realizing there's no longer a reason to save Reina, Shadow visits Rose again, this time as the leader of Shadow Garden. That night, with Shadow's help, Rose overhears Reina and Perv's conspiracy. she finally realizes that her father had been poisoned and controlled by Reina. It's a night of heartbreak for Rose, but amidst her despair, she hears Shadow playing the piano. He's dressed as a normal student now, and Rose believes he is taking a risk out of love to cheer her up. When Shadow leaves, he accidentally drops the ring he took from Perf. Rose picks it up, convinced that it's a proposal ring. Back in the room, Epsilon offers to help Shadow bathe. Her body is now absurdly voluptuous thanks to slime enhancements, which kinda shocks Shadow. In a panic, he lies, claiming he already gave the ring to Rose, to cover up the fact that he lost it. On the wedding day, Perf stares at the ring box, lost in thought. The ring isn't just a piece of jewelry, but has an important function. The king had secretly changed its ownership to Rose, which is why Perf has to marry her to inherit the ring in a legitimate way. But when Perf finally opens the box, the ring is gone. He panics, searching frantically even when the wedding begins. Suddenly, Rose steps forward and accuses a Perf. She's no longer confused, ready to gain power and purge the kingdom's evil. As she puts on the ring, a pre-recorded message from the late king plays. With his final breath, he exposed all Perf's crimes to protect his kingdom and his daughter. In the last minute, the old king entrusted the kingdom to Rose and expressed his love for his daughter one last time. Right after that, a man suddenly kills Perv and Reina on the spot. His name is Mordred, the 9th-seated knight of rounds from the cult. He has been disguised as a soldier, hiding in the palace all along. Now that the ring has a new owner, Mordred activates a special device that, in combination with the ring, summons the demon lord Ragnarok, a monster so powerful he once wiped out an army of 100,000 in a single night. However, before Mordred starts his killing game, Shadow sabotages it. Several female guests suddenly transform into the members of Shadow Garden before everyone's eyes. Shocking and creepy. Epsilon and Beta take on Mordred, while Shadow faces off against Ragnarok. Meanwhile, Rose, along with other Shadow Garden members, is fighting with the summoned monsters and helping heal the wounded citizens. When Rose returns to the palace, Mordred has already been defeated. He then reveals a shocking intel held by the cult's core members. There are actually multiple worlds beyond their own, collectively known as the Demon Realms. The cult found clues that their world originally had no magic at all. It only gained magic after colliding with one of these demon realms. In fact, humans might have migrated from that demon realm. The demon lord Diablos is also connected to that demon realm. Details are scarce, and the cult doesn't know everything. But they did find out that Rose's father accidentally opened a gate to the demon realm, which led to a massive invasion. It was the cult that stopped the invasion and sealed the gate, and that's when the kingdom began secretly working with them. Later, the king cut ties with the cult to protect his daughter, and that's when they turned on him. While all of this is being revealed, Shadow finally takes down Ragnarok. Refusing to accept defeat, Mordred devours Ragnarok's flesh and transforms into a monster. However, his fate is doomed. Our main character Shadow once again takes the spot, eliminating this ridiculous villain once and for all. Suddenly, a rift in space-time opens up and swallows Shadow in. At the same time, the ring on Rose's hand shatters into pieces. Now let's shift the scene to Japan, where things have taken a dark turn, and the country has fallen into a post-apocalyptic nightmare. Akane has somehow become the savior. When she's out, she gets attacked by 2 thugs. Ironically, they're the same criminals who kidnapped her back at the beginning of the story. But now, they'd been modified with strange gear and turned into something inhuman. Their mission is to kidnap Akane again. But suddenly, one of them loses control, trying to kill her. That's when Shadow shows up right on cue, still obsessed with looking cool. That wraps up the full recap of both seasons of the Eminence and Shadow. Congrats! You've made it to the end. How would you rate this anime? Let me know in the comments. It has received great reviews since its release. Some people love the ever-growing harem and how each girl has her own unique charm. Others appreciate the wild creativity, especially how the second season ends with the protagonist being sent back to Earth to save a post-apocalyptic world with his Isekai power. And of course, many fans adore how the main character basically fulfills our childhood dream. Back then, we didn't want power to rule the world. We just wanted to look ridiculously cool while swinging a wooden stick around. Even now as adults, if given a pair of sticks, I may start pretending to be magicians for hours with my buddy. Let's all look forward to Shadow's next badass adventure back in Japan. Alright, that's it for today's video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. I've got tons of other awesome anime recaps waiting for you. See you in the next video.